the brutal truth about wealth. Everyone thinks wealth is about making more money. It isn't. Money is simply the scoreboard. The real game is moving through invisible levels that completely change how you think, earn, and build power. Most people never even realize these levels exist. They spend decades chasing promotions, working overtime, celebrating salary increases, and believing they're getting ahead. But in reality, they're running on a treadmill. The wealthy aren't simply richer because they earn more. They're richer because they play an entirely different game. Today's video explores 6 stages of wealth, inspired by Machiavellian principles of strategy, leverage, and influence. The higher you climb, the less your life depends on working for money, and the more money begins working for you. Let's begin with the stage where nearly everyone starts. Level 1, the survival stage. Every empire, every fortune, and every financial success story begins at the same place: survival. This is where nearly everyone starts. At this level, money isn't about freedom, it's about staying alive. Your paycheck isn't building wealth, it is buying time until the next paycheck arrives. Miss just 1 or 2 months of income and suddenly everything begins to unravel. Rent is overdue, debt collectors start calling, medical bills pile up, groceries become a difficult decision instead of a routine purchase. Every unexpected expense feels like a financial disaster. This is what it means to live in survival mode. Your life becomes ruled by fear. Fear of losing your job, fear of your landlord increasing the rent, fear of your car breaking down, fear of an unexpected hospital visit, fear that one emergency could erase years of hard work. When fear becomes your daily financial advisor, it quietly steals your ability to think strategically. Behavioral economists have long studied what they call the scarcity mindset. When the brain is constantly occupied with immediate financial problems, it has less mental capacity for long-term planning, creativity, and rational decision-making. In other words, poverty isn't just a shortage of money. It often creates a shortage of mental bandwidth. That's why people trapped at this level often make decisions that seem irrational to outsiders. They may accept terrible jobs because they can't afford to wait for better opportunities. They may borrow money at high interest rates simply to survive another month. They may neglect investing in education or learning new skills because every available dollar is needed today. These decisions aren't necessarily the result of laziness or a lack of intelligence. They're decisions made under pressure. And pressure almost always produces short-term thinking. This is one of the cruelest truths about wealth. The very circumstances that make you want financial freedom are often the same circumstances that make it hardest to achieve. At the survival stage, you're also heavily dependent on systems controlled by other people. Your employer determines whether you earn a paycheck. Your landlord determines whether you have a home. The bank determines whether you can access credit. Your creditors determine how much of your future income already belongs to someone else. In many ways, your financial life is being controlled by institutions rather than by your own choices. This dependence creates vulnerability. If your employer downsizes, your income disappears. If interest rates rise, your debt becomes more expensive. If rent increases faster than your salary, your standard of living quietly declines. You're constantly reacting to decisions made by people you've never met. This is why the first stage of wealth isn't really about making more money. It's about escaping dependence. Many people believe that working harder is the answer. So they take overtime, they work weekends, they juggle 2 or even 3 jobs. Yet despite working harder than ever, they often remain exactly where they started. Why? Because you cannot outwork a system you don't understand. The wealthy understand something that most people don't discover until much later. Money follows systems. If you don't understand how the financial system works, how debt works, how investing works, how taxes work, how businesses create value, and how assets generate income, you'll spend your life running inside someone else's system instead of building your own. This is why escaping the survival stage doesn't begin with suffering more. It begins with studying more. Study personal finance, study investing, study business, study negotiation, study high-income skills, study how money actually moves through the economy. Knowledge won't pay tomorrow's rent overnight, but it changes the decisions you make for the next 20 years. Every wealthy person eventually reached a moment where they stopped asking, "How do I survive another month?" and started asking, "How does this system actually work?" That question marks the beginning of every financial transformation. Because the first victory in building wealth isn't earning your first $1 million. It's escaping the constant fear that one bad month could destroy your entire life. Once you achieve that, you've taken your first real step toward financial freedom, and you're finally ready to climb to the next stage. Level 2, the illusion stage, the most dangerous stage of wealth. If the survival stage is ruled by fear, the illusion stage is ruled by comfort, and comfort can be far more dangerous, because at least when you're struggling, you know you have a problem. At this stage, the danger is that everything appears to be working. You have a stable job, your bills are paid on time, there's money in your savings account, you drive a decent car, you may own a home, you take vacations once or twice a year. From the outside, it looks like you've made it. Your family congratulates you, your friends admire your lifestyle. Social media reinforces the image that you're successful. Even you begin to believe you've finally escaped the financial struggle. But here's the brutal truth. You've escaped poverty, not dependence. Your financial stability appears solid, but beneath the surface, it's surprisingly fragile. Every month follows the same pattern. You work, you get paid, you pay your mortgage or rent, you pay your loans, you pay your insurance, you pay your subscriptions, you buy groceries, you make your credit card payments, then you wait for the next paycheck. It feels stable because the cycle repeats. But the cycle only continues as long as you continue working. The day your paycheck stops, the entire machine begins to break down. This is why this stage is an illusion. Your income is active, your expenses are permanent, your lifestyle depends entirely on your ability to exchange time for money. In other words, you've built a comfortable life, not a financially independent one, and that's a critical difference. Many people spend decades climbing to this level only to stop climbing altogether. Why? Because comfort has a strange psychological effect. Once our basic needs are met, our brains naturally become more focused on protecting what we already have than pursuing something greater. Behavioral psychologists call this loss aversion, the tendency to fear losing what we possess more than we value gaining something new. Instead of asking, how do I become financially free? People begin asking, how do I avoid losing what I've built? Without realizing it, they exchange ambition for security. Comfort quietly becomes a prison. This is where lifestyle inflation quietly takes over. Every salary increase is followed by a nicer apartment, a newer car, designer clothes, private schools, luxury vacations, bigger mortgages, better restaurants. The paycheck grows, but so do the obligations. Income increases. Freedom doesn't. The wealthy understand that higher income does not automatically create wealth. In fact, many high-income professionals are living paycheck to paycheck behind expensive lifestyles. They're earning impressive salaries while carrying equally impressive financial obligations. They look rich, but they aren't building wealth. They're performing wealth. Everything is designed to signal success to the outside world. The luxury car, the expensive watch, the prestigious neighborhood, the perfectly curated social media posts, but appearances don't generate financial freedom. Assets do. Cash flow does. Ownership does. Real wealth is often invisible. The irony is that some of the wealthiest people in the world don't look wealthy at all, while others who appear wealthy are only one missed paycheck away from financial crisis. And that's what makes this stage so dangerous. One unexpected event can expose the illusion overnight. A medical emergency, a company downsizing, a recession, a business slowdown, an economic crisis. Suddenly, the savings account that once felt reassuring begins disappearing month after month. Debt grows faster than income. Stress returns. The lifestyle that seemed permanent becomes impossible to maintain. This is why financial experts often say that many middle-class households are only one emergency away from serious financial hardship. Not because they lack income, but because they lack financial resilience. The truth is simple. If your entire lifestyle depends on your continued labor, you haven't reached financial freedom. You've simply built a more comfortable version of dependence. The people who escape this stage are the ones who eventually ask a life-changing question. What continues paying me if I stop working? That single question changes the game, because the goal is no longer earning more money. The goal becomes creating income that exists independently of your time. And that realization leads to the next stage of wealth. The awakening. Level 3. The awakening stage, where money stops being the goal and freedom becomes the mission. This is the stage where everything changes, not because your income suddenly doubles, not because you become rich overnight, but because you begin to see the game differently. For the first time, you realize that wealth isn't about how much money you earn. It's about how much control you have over your life. This is the awakening. It's the moment you stop asking nothing, how can I make more money? And start asking, how can I stop depending on one source of income? That question changes everything. Up until now, you've spent your life trading hours for dollars. Now you begin searching for ways to make money that aren't directly tied to your time. Maybe you start a small business. Maybe you learn a high-income skill that gives you the freedom to work independently. Maybe you begin investing consistently. Maybe you buy your first dividend-paying stock. Maybe you purchase a rental property. Maybe you create a digital product, write a book, build an online audience, or launch a side business. Whatever the path, one thing becomes clear. You experience your first real taste of financial freedom. The first time money arrives while you're asleep. The first time a client finds you instead of the other way around. The first time an investment grows without your daily effort. Something shifts inside you. You realize there's another way to live, and once you've seen it, it's impossible to unsee. This stage isn't defined by enormous wealth. It's defined by expanding possibilities. For the first time in your life, you have options. You aren't completely dependent on one employer, one paycheck, one customer, or one opportunity. And options create power. When you have options, you negotiate differently. You choose differently. You think differently. You stop making decisions out of desperation and start making them out of strategy. You no longer accept every job because you need the money. You begin choosing opportunities that move you closer to your long-term goals. This is where strategic vision begins to develop. Instead of planning for next month, you begin planning for the next decade. Instead of asking, how much can I earn this year? You begin asking, what can I build that will still be producing value 10 years from now? Your mindset shifts from consumption to creation, from earning to ownership, from income to assets. You start studying businesses instead of products. You notice how successful companies create systems that generate income repeatedly. You begin understanding concepts like equity cash flow, scalability, and compounding. You realize that every wealthy person you admire didn't simply work harder. They built something that continued working after they stopped. But here's where many people make another critical mistake. They stop climbing. This stage offers just enough success to make you comfortable. Your side business starts making money. Your investments are growing. Your salary is better than ever. Your life feels secure, and comfort begins whispering a dangerous lie. You've done enough. Don't risk what you've built. Be grateful and stop pushing. It sounds reasonable. It sounds responsible. But more often than not, it's fear disguised as wisdom. The greatest threat at this stage isn't failure. It's satisfaction. History is filled with businesses that stopped innovating because they became comfortable. Investors who stopped learning because early success made them overconfident. Entrepreneurs who settled for good enough when they were capable of building something extraordinary. Growth rarely ends because people run out of potential. It ends because they run out of hunger. The truth is, every major leap in wealth requires embracing uncertainty. The first investment feels risky. Starting a business feels risky. Leaving a comfortable job feels risky. Hiring your first employee feels risky. Expanding into a new market feels risky. Every level of wealth demands a level of courage that the previous stage never required. The people who continue climbing understand an important principle. Risk and recklessness are not the same thing. Recklessness is acting without knowledge. Strategic risk is acting with preparation, education, and calculated confidence. The wealthy don't eliminate risk. They learn how to manage it, because they know that avoiding all risk often creates the greatest risk of all. Living your entire life below your potential. The awakening stage is where you begin to understand that wealth isn't created by working endlessly. It's created by building systems, developing valuable skills, owning productive assets, and making decisions that your future self will thank you for. But if you allow comfort to convince you that you've arrived, your journey ends here. The people who reach extraordinary wealth refuse to let comfort become their destination. They use it as a foundation, because beyond this stage lies something even more powerful: leverage. And leverage is where wealth begins to grow exponentially. Level 4, the leverage stage, where wealth stops, depending on you. This is the stage where the rules of money change completely. Until now, your financial success has largely depended on what you can do: your knowledge, your skills, your effort, your decisions. But at the leverage stage, something remarkable happens. Wealth begins to separate from labor. For the first time, your financial growth is no longer limited by the number of hours in a day. Instead, it is driven by systems. This is the point where the wealthy stop asking growth, how can I work harder? And begin asking, how can I build something that works without me? That single shift in thinking is responsible for creating many of the world's largest fortunes. Because effort has limits. Systems do not. One person can only work so many hours. One business system can serve millions of customers. One investment portfolio can compound for decades. One software product can be sold an unlimited number of times. One book can generate royalties long after its author is gone. One successful brand can create opportunities across industries. The wealthy understand that the goal isn't to become the hardest working person in the room. The goal is to build systems that continue creating value whether you're present or not. This is why ownership becomes far more valuable than income. For most of your life, you've been taught to chase a higher salary, a promotion, a bigger paycheck, a better paying career. Those things certainly matter, but eventually, income reaches a ceiling. Ownership doesn't. A salary pays you once. Ownership can pay you forever. When you own shares in a successful company, you benefit from its growth. When you own rental property, your tenants contribute to your wealth. When you own intellectual property, every sale creates income without additional labor. When you own a business with capable leadership, the company can continue growing while you're focused on building the next opportunity. Ownership changes everything because it allows your wealth to expand independently of your personal effort. But ownership alone isn't enough. Positioning is equally important. The wealthy rarely win because they're the smartest people in every room. They win because they consistently place themselves where opportunities naturally flow. They build relationships before they need them. They invest in growing industries before they become obvious. They acquire valuable assets when others are distracted. They understand that success is often less about working harder and more about standing in the right place when opportunity arrives. Positioning multiplies effort. It allows average actions to produce extraordinary results. Imagine two people with the same talent. One spends years working inside someone else's vision. The other owns a piece of the system that everyone else depends on. Over time, the difference becomes enormous. That's the power of leverage. At this stage, money itself also takes on a completely different meaning. Most people spend their lives believing money exists to buy things, a nicer house, a luxury car, designer clothes, an expensive vacation. But the wealthy eventually discover that money's greatest value isn't consumption, it's capability. Money becomes a tool to purchase freedom, a tool to create influence, a tool to gain access. It buys time by allowing you to delegate work. It buys opportunities by giving you the ability to invest quickly. It buys influence by allowing you to support causes, businesses, and people who align with your vision. It buys access to better education, stronger networks, and opportunities unavailable to those who lack financial flexibility. The truly wealthy don't see money as something to spend. They see it as something to deploy. Every dollar has a job. Every investment has a purpose. Every acquisition strengthens the system. This is why disciplined decision-making becomes essential. Ironically, the more wealth you build, the more distractions appear. People begin offering partnerships. Luxury becomes easier to afford. Status symbols become tempting. Friends and family may expect financial support. Society starts rewarding appearances instead of substance. Without discipline, leverage can quickly become liability. The people who remain wealthy understand the importance of emotional detachment. They don't make investment decisions to impress strangers. They don't buy assets because they're fashionable. They don't chase trends simply because everyone else is doing it. Instead, they ask one simple question: does this decision strengthen my system? If the answer is no, they walk away, even when everyone else says yes. Perhaps the hardest lesson at this stage is learning that wealth often requires sacrificing approval. Not everyone will understand your decisions. Some people will call you obsessed. Others will accuse you of changing. Some will question why you continue investing instead of spending. Others may resent your growing independence. The truth is, building extraordinary wealth often means becoming comfortable with disappointing people. Because approval and freedom rarely travel together. You cannot build an exceptional life while constantly seeking permission from ordinary expectations. The wealthy learn to detach from the opinions of those who don't share their vision, not out of arrogance, but out of focus. They understand that every meaningful achievement requires saying no to distractions, short-term pleasures, and the constant pressure to fit in. The leverage stage is where discipline becomes more valuable than motivation, where ownership becomes more valuable than income, where systems become more valuable than effort, and where money transforms from a reward for hard work into a strategic tool for creating even greater freedom. Once you've mastered leverage, wealth is no longer something you chase. It's something your systems continue producing. And that's what prepares you for the next stage. The stage where wealth no longer simply creates freedom, it creates power. Level 5. The dominant stage, where wealth evolves into power. This is the stage very few people ever reach. Not because it's impossible, but because the requirements change completely. Until now, you've been learning how to build wealth. At the dominant stage, you learn how to preserve it, multiply it, and use it to shape the world around you. This is where wealth is no longer measured by your salary or even by your net worth. It's measured by the quality of your assets, the strength of your influence, and the speed at which your capital compounds. At this level, true wealth isn't sitting in a checking account. It exists in businesses, equity, real estate, private investments, intellectual property, ownership stakes, global opportunities. These assets continue growing, whether you're working, traveling, or sleeping. Money has finally become productive. It is no longer something you earn. It is something that reproduces itself. This is where one of the most powerful forces in finance begins working in your favor. Compounding. Not just the compounding of investment returns, but the compounding of reputation, relationships, knowledge, experience. Every successful investment increases your ability to make another. Every business acquisition creates opportunities for the next. Every influential relationship introduces you to even more influential people. Your wealth no longer grows in a straight line. It grows exponentially. At this stage, your greatest asset is no longer your effort. It's your position, the rooms you have access to, the people who answer your phone calls, the opportunities that arrive before the public even hears about them. Influence becomes a form of currency. People seek your advice. Companies pursue partnerships. Investors bring opportunities directly to you. Banks compete for your business. Governments invite your participation. Your name alone begins opening doors that money alone never could. This is why the truly wealthy understand that influence often outlasts income. Money can buy assets. Influence creates opportunities that money cannot. But with greater influence comes a different kind of battlefield. You're no longer competing against average earners. You're competing with other powerful players. The competition is no longer about who works the hardest. It's about who thinks further ahead, who allocates capital more effectively, who identifies opportunities before everyone else, who builds stronger alliances, who adapts faster when markets change. At this level, strategy becomes more valuable than effort. Patience becomes more valuable than speed. Position becomes more valuable than popularity. The conversations also change. You're no longer discussing monthly budgets. You're discussing acquisitions, private equity, global investments, succession planning, tax strategy, risk management, legacy. The higher you climb, the fewer people truly understand the decisions you're making. And with that comes another difficult reality. Relationships become far more complicated. When resources are limited, friendships often feel simple. But when significant wealth enters the picture, motives become much harder to read. Some people approach you because they admire your character. Others approach you because they admire your resources. Learning the difference becomes one of the most valuable skills you'll ever develop. Trust becomes harder to give. Not because successful people become cynical, but because experience teaches them that not everyone celebrates your success for the right reasons. Some relationships become partnerships. Others become negotiations. Even friendships may carry financial expectations. The wealthy quickly learn that protecting their time, reputation, and capital is just as important as growing them. This isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about becoming wise about who earns access to your life. The higher you climb, the more valuable your attention becomes. Every meeting has an opportunity cost. Every partnership carries risk. Every decision affects people far beyond yourself. This level demands a different version of you. The person who escaped the survival stage cannot remain the person who dominates industries. Transformation becomes the price of influence. You must think differently, lead differently, allocate differently. Sometimes that means choosing long-term strategy over short-term comfort. Sometimes it means saying no to opportunities that look attractive but don't align with your vision. Sometimes it means making unpopular decisions that protect what you've spent decades building. And this is where one of the harshest truths about power emerges. Many people admire wealth. Few understand the sacrifices required to sustain it. To dominate at the highest levels often requires placing ambition above comfort, vision above convenience, discipline above emotion. History shows that some leaders have even placed power above principle, believing that preserving influence justified difficult or morally questionable choices. That path has built empires, but it has also destroyed reputations, families, and legacies. Real mastery is not simply accumulating power. It is knowing how to exercise it without losing your integrity. Because wealth without character eventually becomes a liability. Power without wisdom eventually destroys itself. The greatest financial leaders understand that lasting success isn't measured by how much influence you accumulate. It's measured by what your influence creates, by the businesses you build, the people you elevate, the opportunities you create, and the legacy you leave behind. Because beyond dominance lies the highest level of all, a stage where wealth no longer depends on any one person, a stage where your system's values and legacy continue shaping the future long after you're gone. That is the untouchable stage. Level 6, the untouchable stage, where wealth becomes legacy. This is the final evolution of wealth, a level so few people ever reach that most never even realize it exists. By now, money has stopped being the objective. In fact, money itself has become almost irrelevant, not because it no longer has value, but because you've accumulated enough of it that acquiring more doesn't fundamentally change your life. Another $1 million doesn't create more happiness. Another luxury car doesn't create more freedom. Another mansion doesn't make you more secure. You've already won the financial game. Now you're playing a completely different one, the game of legacy. This is the stage where wealth is no longer measured by what you own. It's measured by what continues to exist because you lived. The question changes from how much can I make to what will outlive me. That single question separates the merely wealthy from the truly influential. At every previous stage, money was the destination. Now money becomes the fuel. It finances ideas, builds institutions, funds innovation, supports scientific research, creates scholarships, launches foundations, invests in entrepreneurs, preserves businesses for future generations, strengthens communities. The focus shifts from accumulation to contribution, because true wealth isn't simply about possessing capital, it's about directing capital towards something that endures. This is where systems become more important than individuals. The greatest fortunes in history rarely survived because one extraordinary person kept working forever. They survived because systems were built, governance structures, family offices, investment frameworks, leadership succession, trusts, foundations, businesses capable of thriving without their founders. The wealthy at this level understand that people are temporary, systems are scalable, institutions are enduring. That's why their greatest investment isn't always another company. It's creating structures that continue producing value long after they're gone. This is also where influence reaches its highest form. At earlier stages, influence helps you close business deals. Now, influence extends far beyond business. It reaches industries, education, technology, healthcare, arts and culture, public policy, economic development, philanthropy. The decisions made by people at this level can shape the direction of entire organizations, industries, and communities for decades. Not because they control everything, but because they invest in ideas, institutions, and leaders that have lasting impact. Interestingly, many of the most influential people at this level are not household names. They aren't seeking millions of followers. They aren't competing for attention on social media. They're often working quietly behind the scenes, serving on boards, funding research, supporting universities, building investment firms, mentoring future leaders, establishing charitable foundations, developing companies that employ thousands of people. Their names may not dominate headlines every day, but the institutions they've helped build continue influencing society year after year. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of wealth. The higher you climb, the less important visibility becomes. Recognition is replaced by impact. Attention is replaced by influence. Status is replaced by significance. Because history rarely remembers people simply for what they spent. It remembers them for what they built, what they discovered, what they preserved, and what they made possible for others. Perhaps the greatest transformation at this stage is philosophical. Luxury loses its appeal, not because luxury is inherently wrong, but because you've discovered that experiences fade, possessions depreciate, status symbols become ordinary, meaning endures. The satisfaction that once came from buying something new is replaced by the fulfillment of creating something lasting. A successful company that continues serving customers decades later. A scholarship that changes a student's life. A foundation that advances medical research. A family whose financial wisdom is passed down across generations instead of being lost in a single lifetime. These become the new measures of success. Because the highest evolution of wealth isn't consumption, it's stewardship. You begin to see yourself not as the owner of wealth, but as its temporary guardian. Your responsibility is no longer simply to grow it. Your responsibility is to ensure that it continues creating value after you're gone. This perspective transforms every decision, every investment, every partnership, every act of generosity, every lesson you pass on. The untouchable stage isn't called untouchable. because nothing can threaten your wealth. Markets still fluctuate. Businesses still face challenges. History has shown that fortunes can rise and fall. It is called untouchable because your impact is no longer tied to a single paycheck, a single company, or even a single lifetime. Your ideas live on. Your systems continue operating. Your institutions continue serving. Your values continue guiding future generations. That is the highest expression of wealth. Not luxury, not power, not fame, but meaning. Because in the end, the richest people are not remembered for what they owned. They are remembered for what they left behind. And that is the final stage of wealth. So, after hearing these 6 stages, ask yourself one question. Where are you right now? Not where you wish you were. Not where your salary says you are. Not where social media tells everyone you are. Where are you, honestly? Because wealth isn't created by pretending you've reached the top. It's created by recognizing the level you're on and making the deliberate decision to climb higher. Most people never leave the survival stage. Many more become trapped in the illusion stage, mistaking a comfortable paycheck for financial freedom. A smaller number awaken and begin building assets. Even fewer learn to leverage systems instead of selling time. Only a handful reach the point where influence compounds alongside capital. And almost no one arrives at the final stage, where wealth is no longer about money at all, but about creating something that continues serving others long after they're gone. Here's the brutal truth. The distance between these stages isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in mindset, in discipline, in patience, in knowledge, in the willingness to delay gratification while everyone else is chasing appearances. The world celebrates expensive lifestyles, but history remembers people who built enduring systems. The world applauds consumption, but wealth quietly rewards ownership. The world teaches you to work for money. The truly wealthy learn to make money work for them, and eventually to make their wealth work for future generations. So don't let comfort convince you that you've arrived. Don't let fear convince you that you'll never escape. And don't mistake income for independence. Study the game. Build valuable skills. Own productive assets. Think in decades instead of days. Because every wealthy person was once standing exactly where someone else decided to quit. The only question that remains is, will you keep climbing? If you found value in today's video, don't forget to hit the like button because it tells YouTube to share this message with more people who need to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you're serious about mastering the psychology of wealth, building lasting financial freedom, and learning the timeless principles that separate those who merely earn money from those who create generational wealth. And if you made it this far, leave a comment below and tell me, which stage do you believe you're in right now? And what is one action you're going to take this year to reach the next level? I'd love to read your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.